There was a house in a quiet town where children learned early to lower their voices and not ask questions. A house where the sun seemed to dim a little at the doorway. A house the neighbors crossed the street rather than pass. In that house lived a woman named Comfort, old and worn by years most never saw. Comfort had a daughter, Faith. Faith had 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Joy. The women in that family were gentle and unlucky. Long before Elizabeth was born, Comfort had been given a warning by the elders of her village. An old story, a bitter way of explaining what never should have happened. They called it Ogbanje in some places. A spirit child who is born, dies young, and returns again and again. Families who knew of Ogbanje feared them or tried to stop them out of sheer desperation. When a child, a girl, kept dying each time she reached 1 year old, the worry grew sharp in the family. She came back, over and over. Each time she returned to a different mother, a relative named Tola, and each time she slipped away again before she turned 1. There are customs in that part of the world for such a child, ways to mark them, to bind them so they do not find their way home again. Some mark the child's skin. Some give the body a token that will scare the spirit away. Some scorch the body at death, so the spirit cannot cross back. It is ugly work done in fear. Comfort counseled Tola the last time the child died. Mark her, she told her. Mark her so she won't come back. It was not cruelty, she said. It was survival. The village had whispered already. Families who could not break the cycle lost everything. Children kept dying. Houses emptied. Men left. The fear hardened into decisions. They tried it. The marks were made. The eyes was plugged out. There was a hush and a smoke and a last small light in the room where the child was laid. For a time, it seemed that the rituals worked. But magic, and whatever answers the world gives us for things we cannot explain, rarely follows the rules we ask of it. The child returned once more. This time she came back changed. When they opened the blanket, they found her eyes sealed, plugs of cloth, burned and stitched, buried where sight should have been. They had thought that the spirit could not find the light of home. If it could not see the faces that had once loved it, it might skip the family forever. Yet she came back as a blind child. She opened her mouth and crawled and giggled without the eyes she had been given at birth. People were relieved until the cruelty began. Children at the market pointed. Tongues wagged. A shame the family could not bury. The new child, named Ayin, carried a sadness that did not belong to a child. She carried a memory of being refused, burned, and stitched. The mockery and the stares carved something inside her that never healed. And beyond the human hurt burned something older, a spirit wronged and clever. If you lived among people who believe that gestures can bind the soul, then you know one very dangerous truth. Spirits remember the hands that wrote their fate, and they make plans that take years to unfold. Ayin grew with a hardness at her center. When she was mocked, she did not cry. When they pushed her away, she watched and she learned. The families that had once advised comfort, Dion suggested the mark, who said it is for your good, would discover the consequence of words spoken in the name of fear. As Ayin came of age, the family saw that misfortune followed them like a shadow. Blindness spread, not by accident, not by illness alone. Sisters grew sightless at certain ages. A child would look at the world for a time, then wake one morning and find only darkness where light had been. Eyes closed as if some cold hand had pressed them shut. By the time it reached Comfort's generation, 3 women in the house were blind. Faith, Elizabeth, and Comfort. They were not the only cost. The house became a place whispers circled. Marriage offers stopped. Doors slammed in faces. A man who once courted Joy saw the 3 blind women in her home and turned away. "No," he said quietly. "I can't bring children into that." They called it a curse. Some called it justice. To Ayin, bent and small, the sightless village felt like an answering of the wrongs done to her. She had been blocked from the world. She had been stitched and sealed. She did to others what had been done to her. When Joy found herself pregnant and alone, when the town refused to marry into that house because of its dark history, it was not only shame that broke the family. It was hunger. The world shut their doors. Good men left. The lineage frayed. Sometimes, When the wind slips through the eaves of an old house at night, and you do not think anyone is watching, you might hear the quiet voice of regret. You might hear, soft as a breath, the name of someone who refused a look, who thought a ritual could fix what only understanding could have spared. The lesson in that whisper is simple and terrible. Whenever you give advice born of fear, be ready for what your counsel might cause. When you choose rituals over mercy, you may cure nothing and create a wound that eats the next generations. Comfort had been trying to protect her living line from a grief that had haunted them. But the remedy, the mark, the plug, the burning to send the spirit away, did not simply erase a problem. It twisted it and returned it magnified, reshaped into fate. Eye and blindness was not the end of the story. It was an accusation. And if there are spirits who keep accounts, who remember the hands that bind and the hands that wound, then perhaps the true horror is not the darkness you cannot see with your eyes, but the darkness you carry in the way you treat others when you are afraid. They say iron still walks the rooms of that house in the deep nights. They say people who go near the window will see a small face, blind and unblinking, staring out into a world that will not look back. And they say sometimes the eyes of the oldest in the family go slack for a moment and then open to no light at all. So when someone asks you to protect your family with a desperate remedy, when someone urges harm in the name of safety, remember comfort and faith and Elizabeth and joy. Remember a child whose sight was taken to keep her away, and how the world found that could not stop a spirit's return. Because curses are not always woven by strangers. Often, they begin with the best of intentions.